They never told you this, but sometimes the most beautiful parts of yourself are the ones you've pushed away. Imagine this. What if the qualities you secretly envy in others, the radiance you admire but believe you don't have, are not missing at all? What if they're simply locked in a room deep inside you, waiting for you to turn the key? Carl Jung left us with a paradox. What you reject in yourself doesn't disappear. It becomes the shadow. And inside that shadow, buried under shame, fear, or doubt, lives the very beauty you've been searching for all along. So let me ask you, have you ever felt a quiet ache when someone else walks into the room, shining with confidence? Or maybe you've scrolled through social media and thought, why can't I be that free, that magnetic, that abundant? That pang isn't proof you're lacking. It's proof that something inside you is knocking, begging to be seen. But here's the mystery. Why do we reject our own beauty? Why do we exile abundance when it's part of our very nature? Stay with me, because this journey isn't about quick fixes or surface tricks. This is shadow work. It's about peeling back layers of repression, projection, and fear, until you meet the treasures that have been waiting in the dark. Treasures like your natural creativity, your ability to love deeply, your power to walk into a room and be fully alive. Think of a garden. Leave it untended, and weeds take over. But hidden under those weeds are seeds that were never given light. Your shadow is the overgrown soil, and those seeds are your rejected beauty. When you turn toward the shadow, you don't just pull out weeds. You uncover the garden you were meant to tend. And here's the haunting truth. Jung believed that ignoring the shadow doesn't just cost us happiness, it costs us wholeness. Because light and dark are two sides of the same coin. Deny one, and you lose both. So today, we begin exploring how shadow work can reveal the abundance inside you, not just material abundance, but the abundance of self-worth, confidence, love, and creative energy. Picture this. A life where you no longer envy others because you recognize that same beauty in yourself. A life where the qualities you crave are not out there, but already alive in here. Along the way, you'll hear symbolic stories, modern examples, and practices that help you reclaim what you've rejected. We'll uncover the signs that your shadow is holding your beauty hostage and how to free it. And here's my invitation. Don't just listen passively. Let these words land inside you. Let them stir questions. Because the insight waiting at the end is the one Jung feared most, the revelation that the part of yourself you've rejected the hardest may also be the part with the greatest power to transform your life. So take a breath. Stay close. We're about to walk into the dark together, and I promise there's light waiting at the end. Let's begin with something simple yet unsettling. Every single one of us carries a hidden self, a side we don't show on Instagram, don't bring to job interviews, and sometimes don't even admit to ourselves in the mirror. Carl Jung called this hidden side the shadow. When most people hear the word shadow, they think of flaws, mistakes, or darkness. But that's only half the truth. The shadow doesn't just hold the parts we feel ashamed of. It also carries the gold, the talents, strengths, and beauty we've rejected along the way. And that is what makes shadow work so powerful. But why do we push these parts away in the first place? Think back to childhood. Maybe you were told you were too loud, so you learned to be quiet. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive, so you toughened up. Maybe you were only praised when you brought home perfect grades, so you buried the playful, creative side of yourself just to fit the mold. Each time that happened, a piece of you slipped into the dark. Over time, those pieces piled up until an entire world of your true self was hidden beneath the surface. And here's the thing, the shadow doesn't just stay silent. It leaks out. It shows itself in envy, in sudden bursts of anger, in insecurity, or in that strange feeling that you're living only half a life. Think of it like a closet you keep stuffing things into. At first, the door shuts easily, but eventually, the closet gets so full that it won't close anymore. What you've tried to hide spills out into your relationships, your work, your health, your dreams. And that's when life feels off, no matter how hard you try to hold it together. This is why shadow work matters so much today. We live in a world obsessed with appearances. Social media rewards the highlight reel, At work, we're taught to put on a mask of productivity. Even in relationships, we often play roles: the supportive friend, the strong parent, the dependable partner. And yet, behind those roles, there's a quiet voice whispering, "This isn't the whole of me." Shadow work invites you to listen to that voice. It asks, what if you stopped rejecting the hidden parts and welcomed them back instead? For anyone in their 20s, 30s, or 40s years, when careers, families, and identities are being built, shadow work isn't just psychology, it's survival. Because when you don't integrate the shadow, you project it. You unconsciously place what you reject in yourself onto others. Have you ever noticed how the traits you dislike most in other people are often the very traits you secretly wrestle with inside? That irritation with someone's arrogance might actually point to your own buried desire to be confident. That anger at someone's laziness might mirror your own repressed need for rest. That's projection. It's one of the shadow's favorite disguises. But here's the hopeful part. When you begin to recognize projection, something shifts. Suddenly, the qualities that once triggered you become doorways to growth. You stop living in constant reaction to others and begin living in deeper connection with yourself. And the ripple effects are everywhere. In love, you stop chasing partners who mirror your wounds and start attracting those who resonate with your wholeness. In work, you stop sabotaging your creativity and begin expressing your natural gifts. In your own heart, you stop feeling like an imposter and start embodying the beauty and abundance that were hidden in plain sight all along. So let me ask you, what parts of yourself have you left behind? Where do you feel that quiet sense of something missing? Because here's the truth Jung uncovered. Wholeness doesn't come from polishing your good parts and hiding the rest. It comes from embracing the whole, the light and the dark, the polished and the raw, the strengths and the struggles. And in today's world, where perfection is glorified and authenticity is rare, shadow work becomes more than inner healing. It becomes an act of courage, an act of reclaiming not just the beauty you've rejected, but the abundance of life you were always meant to live. So, as we continue, remember this. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your mirror. It's the uninvited guest that holds the gift you've been waiting for. And the deeper you go into it, the more you'll realize that everything you thought you lacked has been inside you all along. Let me tell you a story. Long ago, there was a kingdom with a magnificent fountain at its center. Its water carried life, beauty, and abundance. People came from far and wide to drink from it, to celebrate, to dream beside it. But one day, the fountain dried up, the fields turned barren, and despair fell over the kingdom. The king ordered his people to search for water elsewhere, but nothing worked. Years passed until a traveler arrived. Instead of searching outside, he asked to see the fountain itself. And what he found was surprising. The fountain wasn't broken, it was blocked. Stones, dirt, and weeds had been thrown into it over the years until no water could flow. The life-giving spring was still there. It had always been there. It was just buried under what had been rejected and forgotten. That fountain is your shadow. The flowing water is your inner abundance, your creativity, your beauty, your confidence, your sense of worth. And the stones? Those are the rejections, the labels, the moments you were told you were too much or not enough. Each stone is a story you believed about yourself. Over time, those stories clogged the flow. You didn't lose your beauty, you only buried it. Now, let's bring this closer to real life. Imagine Sarah, a woman in her mid-30s. On paper, she's successful, smart, organized, responsible. But every time she sees her friends sharing their art or music online, or stepping boldly into new adventures, she feels a sharp pang of envy. She thinks, I wish I had that courage. I wish I could be that free. What she doesn't realize is that as a child, Sarah loved painting. She would lose herself for hours in color and shape. But one day, a teacher told her art was just a hobby, and that she should focus on real subjects. At home, her parents praised her for good grades, but never for her imagination. Slowly, Sarah put her paints away. Slowly, she buried her freedom. Fast forward to today. Her creativity hasn't vanished. It lives in her shadow, It shows up as envy when she sees others creating. It whispers as longing when she walks past an art supply store. And until she turns toward her shadow, she'll keep searching outside for the beauty she already carries inside. Do you see the parallel? The kingdom didn't lose its fountain. Sarah didn't lose her creativity. And you haven't lost your beauty or abundance either. You've only buried them under the stones of rejection. Shadow work is the process of returning to that fountain, lifting the stones one by one, and allowing the water to flow again. It's not glamorous work. Sometimes it's muddy. Sometimes it feels heavy. But every stone you lift reveals more of what was always there: your fullness, your radiance, your freedom. So let me ask you, what stones have been placed in your fountain? Was it the time someone told you your body wasn't beautiful enough? The moment your laughter was called too loud? The day your dream was dismissed as unrealistic? Those moments may have buried parts of you, but they never destroyed them. The water is still there. The abundance is still waiting, just like the fountain in the forgotten kingdom. And here's the empowering truth. When you begin clearing the shadow, you don't just reclaim your gifts. You stop envying others. Their light no longer reminds you of your lack, it reminds you of your own brilliance. Their beauty becomes a mirror, reflecting the parts of you that are ready to come home. The traveler in the story didn't bring new water. He revealed what had always been there. That is what shadow work does. It shows you that the beauty and abundance you've been chasing were never out there. They've been inside, waiting for you to look where you least wanted to in the shadow. And as we continue, we'll explore how to recognize when your shadow is holding that beauty hostage. Because awareness is always the first step. Once you see the signs, you'll know exactly where to begin. Now that we've opened the door to the shadow, let's make this practical. How do you know when your rejected beauty and abundance are trapped in the dark? Jung believed the shadow always reveals itself, not directly, but through signs. If you pay attention, you'll notice the whispers. You'll notice the echoes of what you've hidden. The first sign is envy. Most of us treat envy like something shameful. But envy is actually a clue, a flashlight pointing to the treasure you've buried. Think about the last time you felt it. Maybe it was a friend landing a dream job. Maybe it was someone posting radiant photos online. Maybe it was a colleague who always seems effortlessly confident. That sting isn't proof that you're lacking. It's a reminder. You don't just want what they have. A part of you already is that, but it's been locked away. So next time envy shows up, pause. Ask yourself, what exactly do I admire here? Where does this live in me, waiting to be claimed? When you do, envy stops being poison and becomes a mirror. The second sign is harsh self-criticism. That relentless voice inside that says, "You're not enough. Don't even try. Stay small." Many people believe that voice is telling the truth, but often it's the shadow speaking. The parts of you you've rejected don't vanish. They push back. And sometimes they push back through self-sabotage disguised as judgment. Think about it. If you were told not to be too expressive, the shadow may attack you the moment you try to share your ideas. If you were told not to shine too brightly, the shadow might whisper insults as soon as you step onto a stage or raise your hand at work. That inner critic isn't your deepest truth. It's an old echo, a voice borrowed from someone long ago. So, start noticing the script. Write down the exact words that voice uses. Then ask yourself, whose voice is this really? Often you'll realize it isn't yours at all. It might be a parent, a teacher, a cultural belief. Recognizing that is the first step to reclaiming your own voice. The third sign is emotional overreaction. Have you ever surprised yourself with how strongly you reacted to something small? Maybe someone made an offhand comment, and suddenly you felt a wave of anger, shame, or defensiveness far bigger than the moment itself. That intensity is a signal. Overreactions happen when a hidden wound gets touched. The shadow, carrying old pain and rejected parts, leaps forward to protect you. But in doing so, it reveals where your abundance is trapped. For example, imagine someone compliments your intelligence. Instead of joy, you feel uncomfortable, maybe even dismissive. That discomfort points to a part of you that hasn't fully accepted your own brilliance. The shadow resists what it doesn't yet know how to embrace. So when a strong reaction rises, don't rush to judge it. Pause and ask, what part of me is being touched right now? The bigger the feeling, the closer you are to a piece of yourself that's waiting to be integrated. Now, why do these signs matter? Because they flip the story. Envy isn't proof you're lacking, it's proof you're full of hidden abundance. Self-criticism isn't truth. It's the shadow trying to keep you safe. Overreactions aren't weakness. They're signals that something inside you wants to come home. When you start reading these signs differently, you stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself as layered. Every pang of envy, every sharp inner voice, every wave of reaction becomes a guide. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You begin asking, what's waiting for me in the dark? And that question changes everything. Because once you know how to listen, the shadow stops being a monster. It becomes a teacher. It's no longer about fighting what's hidden, but about learning from it. And the more you learn, the more you reclaim the beauty and abundance that have always been yours. In the last section, we uncovered 3 signs of the shadow: envy, self-criticism, and emotional overreactions. But the shadow has more subtle disguises. It doesn't just shout through anger or jealousy. Sometimes, it hides in patterns that look normal on the surface, even admirable. Let's look at 3 more signs that your hidden beauty and abundance are being held back. The first is perfectionism. At first glance, perfectionism looks like high standards, discipline, even excellence. But underneath, it often carries a wound, the belief that you're only worthy when flawless. When you demand perfection from yourself, you reject the messy, spontaneous, human parts of you. And ironically, those are the very parts that hold your creativity and vitality. How many times have you delayed sharing an idea, starting a project, or even posting something simple online because it wasn't perfect? That hesitation isn't about quality. It's the shadow keeping your abundance locked behind impossible standards. The way out is through imperfect action. Share before it feels fully ready. Speak even if your voice trembles. Each time you choose real over perfect, you reclaim a piece of yourself that's been hidden. The second sign is chronic comparison. You know that habit of measuring yourself against others, always coming up short? That's not about them. That's your shadow at work. Each time you compare, you're projecting your own hidden qualities onto someone else. You might shrink when you see someone's charisma. You might feel small next to another's success. But comparison isn't proof that you're empty. It's a mirror, showing you what's already inside but unclaimed. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The same is true for what dazzles us." So, when comparison rises, ask yourself, what exactly do I admire in this person? And where does that live in me? Suddenly, comparison becomes a doorway instead of a dead end. The third sign is fear of being seen. Many of us long for connection, recognition, love. Yet at the same time, we're terrified of being truly visible. Why? Because being seen risks exposing the parts we've worked hardest to hide. If you shine too brightly, what if people see your flaws? If you speak your truth, what if they judge the parts you've buried? This fear convinces you that safety lies in staying small, staying quiet, staying hidden. But here's the tragedy. Your abundance can't flow if you never allow yourself to be seen. The light you've been hiding doesn't become dangerous just because it's visible. In fact, it becomes magnetic. So try a small experiment. Share something honest with a trusted friend. Express a piece of your creativity, even if it feels vulnerable. Each small act loosens the shadow's grip and reminds you that your beauty is not only safe, it's powerful. When you put these signs together, perfectionism, comparison, and fear of being seen, you notice a pattern. The shadow doesn't only hide in explosive emotions. It also hides in the quiet daily choices. The projects you don't start, the words you don't say, the love you don't allow yourself to receive. And here's the shift. The shadow hasn't been blocking you to harm you. It's been trying to protect you from judgment, from rejection, from failure. But in protecting you, it also locked away the very things that make life rich. The moment you recognize these signs, you gain choice. You can keep letting the shadow run the show, or you can start bringing those rejected parts back into the light. And remember, Integration isn't about erasing fear or comparison, it's about listening to what they reveal. On the other side of these patterns lies the very beauty you've been searching for all along. So far, we've uncovered the obvious signs of the shadow envy: self-criticism, overreactions, perfectionism, comparison, and the fear of being seen. These are patterns you can usually spot once you start paying attention. But the shadow also hides more quietly. It weaves itself into habits that feel ordinary, even responsible. If you want to reclaim your hidden beauty and abundance, you have to notice the subtle signs too, the whispers that don't shout, but still steer your life. One of those signs is the constant need for control. On the surface, control looks like responsibility. You keep everything in order, you plan ahead, you make sure nothing slips. But when control becomes rigid, when you feel anxious unless every detail is managed, that's usually the shadow trying to protect you. Somewhere along the way, you learned that life was unsafe, that spontaneity might bring chaos or pain. So you rejected the softer, freer parts of yourself and built walls of control instead. But here's the paradox. The very abundance you long for, creativity, intimacy, joy, can only flow when you loosen your grip. Control may keep chaos out, but it also keeps beauty out. Try loosening the reins, even in small ways. Let a conversation unfold without planning what you'll say. Let someone else take the lead. Notice the discomfort. That's not weakness. That's the shadow stretching. Another hidden sign is self-sabotage, especially at the edge of success. Have you ever noticed how right when things start to go well, the job offer, the relationship, the breakthrough, something inside you pulls back? You procrastinate, pick a fight, or convince yourself you're not ready. This is the shadow guarding the gates. Deep down, it carries the old belief that you don't deserve abundance. So the closer you get to receiving it, the more it panics. To the shadow, success feels unsafe, too big, too vulnerable. That's why so many capable people hold themselves back. Not because they lack talent, but because they carry a hidden story that says, "This isn't for me." When you notice yourself pulling back, pause. Ask gently, what part of me is afraid of abundance? Often, just naming the fear takes away its secret power. And then there's the quietest sign of all, emotional numbness. Not sadness, not anger, just flatness. Like life is muted, like you're watching it through fogged glass. You don't feel deep pain, but you don't feel deep joy either. Numbness isn't the absence of feeling. It's the shadow protecting you from being overwhelmed. It says, if you don't feel too much, you can't get hurt. But in shielding you from pain, it also blocks your access to beauty. Passion, love, vitality, all of these live behind the wall of numbness. If this sounds familiar, begin gently. Invite your feelings back through music, art, journaling. Don't force joy. Just notice what stirs a flicker inside you. Over time, those flickers grow. Numbness is not emptiness. It's frozen energy waiting to thaw. When you step back, you can see the deeper pattern. Control, sabotage, and numbness are not here to destroy you. They're here to protect you. They're shields against chaos, against failure, against heartbreak. But they also keep you from the fullness of life. This is why shadow work matters so deeply. Until you notice these hidden patterns, you'll keep living in a loop, controlling instead of flowing, sabotaging instead of receiving, numbing instead of feeling alive. The moment you see them, you gain choice. You can thank the shadow for trying to keep you safe, and then remind it that you no longer need to live in hiding. That's when something shifts. That's when you begin to taste the beauty that was always inside you. Because abundance doesn't come from perfection or from chasing something outside. It comes from within, from the very parts of you that were waiting in the dark to be welcomed home. We've seen the signs: envy, self-criticism, overreactions, perfectionism, comparison, fear of being seen, control, sabotage, and even numbness, each one a signal from the shadow. But awareness is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you engage with the shadow directly. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is through journaling and daily practice. Journaling is more than putting words on paper. It's like holding up a mirror to your unconscious. When you write, you bypass the polished mask you wear in daily life. You give space to the parts of you that rarely get a voice. And slowly, the beauty you've rejected begins to reappear. Let's walk through a few practices together. Start with the envy mirror. Write down 3 people you envy. They could be friends, coworkers, celebrities, even strangers online. For each one, ask yourself, what exactly do I envy in them? How does that quality show up in their life? And where might this quality already live inside me? At first, you might resist. Your mind will say, that's not me. But stay with it. Maybe the freedom you admire is something you've only expressed in small, hidden ways. Maybe the confidence you crave was once alive in you as a child before you learned to hide it. Envy, when seen clearly, stops being poison and becomes medicine. Then there's a practice with the critic inside you. The next time that sharp voice appears, don't push it away. Write down its words exactly as you hear them. And then respond. Maybe it says, "You're not good enough to start that project." You write it down. Then you answer, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm going to try anyway." When you do this, you realize the critic isn't a monster. It's a scared part of you, repeating old warnings. Giving it a voice, then setting a boundary, turns the critic from enemy into ally. A deeper practice is writing a shadow letter. Address it directly. "Dear Shadow, here's what I've been afraid to admit." Let yourself pour out the desires, the fears, the beauty you've hidden. Don't censor, just write. And when you finish, read it aloud to yourself. Hearing your own voice speak those words is powerful. It bridges the conscious and the unconscious. It brings light to what's been buried. But journaling isn't the only way. Shadow work deepens through lived experience. You can start with small, daily practices. Try what I call the 1% rule. Each day, do one small thing that stretches you by just 1%. Share a thought you'd usually hide. Wear something that feels more like your true style. Speak up once in a meeting, where you'd normally stay silent. These tiny acts build trust with your shadow. They show it that it's safe to step out of hiding. Another practice is the mirror. Stand in front of your reflection for 2 minutes. Look yourself in the eyes and say, "I see you. I welcome all of you." It might feel awkward. It might bring up emotion. But repetition softens the resistance. Slowly, your shadow begins to trust that you're finally ready to see it. And then, there's movement. Play a song that stirs something inside you. Let your body move however it wants for 5 minutes. Dance, sway, stomp, it doesn't matter. This isn't performance. It's release. It's allowing the energy of the shadow to flow instead of staying locked inside. These practices matter because the shadow doesn't integrate through force. It integrates through relationship. Every time you write, every time you act with gentle bravery, every time you allow your body to express, you're saying, "I see you. I hear you. You belong." And piece by piece, the parts you rejected begin to return. The abundance you thought was gone starts to flow again. This isn't about quick fixes. Shadow work is a lifelong process. But every journal entry, every step of courage, every quiet moment in the mirror is another stone lifted from the fountain. More water, more light, more life. So ask yourself this tonight. If I truly believed my abundance was already inside me, what part of myself would I welcome back today? If there's one place where the shadow loves to appear, it's in love. Relationships are like mirrors. They reflect back the parts of ourselves we'd rather not see. And because the shadow holds both our wounds and our rejected beauty, intimacy becomes the stage where these hidden forces reveal themselves most clearly. Think about it. When you fall in love, you don't just meet another person, you also meet your own shadow. Attraction often begins with projection. Jung believed that we don't fall in love with people as they are, but with the qualities of our own psyche projected onto them. That's why early romance can feel so magical. You're not only drawn to their smile, humor, or strength. You're also drawn to the parts of yourself you've buried, now glowing in someone else. Maybe you're enchanted by someone's boldness because you've hidden your own. Maybe you admire their nurturing side because you've rejected your softness. At first, these qualities feel intoxicating. Later, they can trigger you. The boldness that once drew you in might begin to feel too much. The nurturing that once felt comforting might start to feel smothering. That's the shadow at work, first enchanting you, then confronting you. Conflict, too, often carries the shadow's fingerprints. Have you ever noticed how small arguments in relationships can stir huge emotions? A forgotten text, a careless tone, a delayed response. Suddenly, it feels like the world is ending. That intensity is rarely about the present moment. It's the shadow pulling old wounds into the spotlight. Maybe your partner's distance touches a childhood wound of feeling unseen. Maybe their criticism awakens the old voice that told you you'd never be enough. Without realizing it, you're not just reacting to your partner, you're wrestling with your own shadow. And then there's vulnerability. Relationships thrive on it, but vulnerability is also what the shadow fears most, because it means exposing the very parts you've tried to hide. It means saying, "Here's my longing, here's my fear, here's the beauty I've rejected." To the shadow, that exposure feels dangerous. So it builds defenses, sarcasm, withdrawal, over-explaining, or keeping conversations shallow. But here's the paradox. The abundance we crave in relationships, love, connection, trust, can only bloom when we allow ourselves to be seen. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bridge to intimacy. You don't have to start with grand gestures. Try micro-vulnerability. Share one small truth you'd normally keep inside. Say, "I feel nervous right now," or "I really need support today." Each time you do, you weaken the shadow's grip and strengthen the bond between you and the person you love. When you bring shadow work into your relationships, everything shifts. Instead of blaming your partner for every trigger, you start asking, "What is this moment teaching me about myself?" Instead of expecting them to fill the emptiness inside you, you begin reclaiming your own abundance. And as you do, love deepens. Because intimacy isn't about two perfect people coming together. It's about two imperfect people holding space for each other's shadows while walking toward the light. So imagine a relationship where envy becomes admiration, where conflict becomes an opportunity for healing, where vulnerability isn't feared but welcomed. That's the gift of shadow work in love. Now, pause for a moment and reflect. In your own relationships, whether romantic, family, or friendships, where do you feel the strongest triggers? Where do you notice the same patterns repeating? Those aren't signs that you're doomed in love. They're invitations. They're your shadow whispering, "Look here, the beauty you seek in another is already within you. The abundance you crave in love is waiting inside yourself." Relationships aren't just companionship, they are classrooms. And in that classroom, the shadow is one of the greatest teachers. When you dare to meet it, you don't just transform your relationships, you transform yourself. If relationships are mirrors of the shadow, then work and social life are the stage where the shadow performs its hidden play. Your career, your friendships, your online presence, all of these carry not only your strengths, but also the parts of you you've pushed away. In modern culture, where achievement and image are everything, the shadow easily disguises itself. It shows up as ambition, productivity, or social charm. On the surface, these look admirable, but underneath, they may carry the traces of what you've rejected. Think about work. Some people throw themselves into it with relentless drive. They achieve, they climb, they outperform. To the outside world, it looks like success. But sometimes, that overdrive comes from the shadow, a desperate attempt to prove worth, to silence the old belief that you're not enough. Others swing the opposite way. They hold back, they procrastinate, they sabotage opportunities. This too can be the shadow whispering, "Stay small, don't risk failure, don't let yourself be seen." Whether it shows up as overworking or underworking, the root is the same, a buried part of you that equates self-worth with performance. So pause and ask yourself, am I working from joy or from fear? That one question can reveal whether your energy comes from abundance or from the shadow's grip. The shadow also shows up socially, in the masks we wear. Maybe you're the funny one, always cracking jokes so no one sees your sadness. Maybe you're the responsible one, never letting yourself relax. Maybe you're the helpful one, hiding your own needs behind endless giving. These masks keep you safe, but they also keep you trapped. Because behind them lies your rejected beauty, the deeper self that longs not just to be admired for a role, but to be known for who you truly are. So try dropping the mask, even just a little. In your next conversation, share one honest thought instead of playing the part. You may be surprised how often others respond with relief. Authenticity invites authenticity. And then there's the online world. Social media has become one of the clearest arenas for shadow projection. Scrolling often stirs envy, comparison, or irritation. But those reactions aren't just about other people's posts. They're about your shadow reflecting back at you. When you envy someone's lifestyle online, it may be your own hidden longing for freedom. When you bristle at someone's constant self-promotion, it might reflect your own buried desire to be more visible. The online world magnifies the shadow, making it impossible to ignore. Instead of letting it drain you, use it as a tool. Each time you feel triggered online, pause and ask, what part of me is this touching? Suddenly, even social media becomes a mirror for growth. The cost of ignoring the shadow in work and social life is heavy. People burn out chasing promotions, only to feel empty when they get them. Friendships stay surface level, never deepening. Online interactions leave people feeling small instead of inspired. But when you face the shadow, everything changes. Work stops being about proving yourself and becomes about expressing your natural gifts. Friendships deepen because you show up as your whole self. Social media stops being a battlefield and becomes a mirror. In short, you stop living a divided life. One self for work, another for friends, another for the screen. Instead, you begin to integrate, and integration brings abundance. Not just money or recognition, but something deeper: energy, presence, connection. When the shadow no longer drains you, you suddenly discover you have more to give, more to share, more to live. So take a moment to reflect. In your work, in your friendships, in your online world, where do you feel most drained? Where do you feel most fake? Where do you feel the strongest envy or resistance? These aren't failures. They're invitations. They're your shadow showing you exactly where your hidden abundance is waiting to return. When many people discover shadow work, they arrive through spirituality or self-help. They're looking for healing, growth, peace, and light. These are beautiful intentions. But here's the paradox. The more we chase only light, the more our shadow grows in the dark. This is what Jung warned about the trap of spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing happens when we use spiritual ideas or practices to avoid uncomfortable emotions. Instead of facing anger, sadness, or envy, we cover them with mantras, affirmations, or positive vibes-only slogans. It sounds uplifting, but underneath it's just another way of rejection. We exile the parts of ourselves that don't look spiritual enough, and the shadow grows heavier while we pretend to float above it. Maybe you've seen the mask of love and light. Someone insists, "I'm fine, I'm always happy, I only focus on love." But behind that mask, there's often buried pain, and sooner or later, it leaks out through resentment, burnout, or sudden outbursts. The shadow can't be silenced by slogans. It demands to be acknowledged. Another trap is the idea of rising above. People say things like, "I don't get angry anymore. I'm beyond that. I've detached from everything." Detachment can be useful, but used as an escape, it becomes dangerous, because the shadow isn't fooled. If anger, desire, or grief haven't been faced, they don't disappear. They hide, waiting for the right moment to return. And here's why bypassing blocks abundance. Creativity often lives in the same place as chaos. Compassion is born from our wounds. Strength grows not from escaping struggle, but from walking through it. When we bypass, we cut ourselves off from the very soil abundance needs to grow. So how do we avoid the trap? By grounding our spirituality in honesty. When you meditate, don't just chase calm. Welcome whatever arises: anger, joy, sadness, even numbness. All of it has something to teach. When you use affirmations, Shift the focus. Instead of repeating, "I am only love and light," try, "I welcome all parts of myself into love." That changes everything. And notice where you avoid. If you resist talking about grief, fear, or envy, that's probably where your shadow is asking for attention. Let me give you an example. Michael, a man in his 40s, was devoted to yoga and meditation. To everyone else, he seemed calm and enlightened. But at home, he snapped at his partner over small things. Afterwards, he felt ashamed and doubled down on being spiritual to cover it up. Michael's problem wasn't that he meditated. It was that he used his practice to avoid his shadow. His unacknowledged anger leaked into the very relationship he wanted to protect. But when he began journaling honestly about his anger, something shifted. He realized it carried important information about boundaries, about unmet needs, about self-respect. Integrating it didn't make him less spiritual, it made him more whole. That's the gift of true integration. Spirituality stops being about pretending to be above human struggles. It becomes about embracing your full humanity. Instead of chasing light, you embody it. Instead of preaching love, you practice it, including love for the parts you once tried to reject. And here's the beautiful part: abundance flows more freely. Because you're no longer splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You're no longer wasting energy pretending. You're fully present, fully alive, fully real. So ask yourself, where in your life are you tempted to bypass? Where do you say, "I'm fine," when you're not? Which feelings have you quietly labeled as unspiritual? Remember this: the beauty you've rejected may be hiding in those very emotions. Integrating them doesn't make you less spiritual. It makes you authentic. The shadow doesn't vanish in meditation or dissolve in affirmations. It transforms when you face it. And when you do, you realize the abundance you've been seeking isn't floating above the clouds. It's been waiting in the depths of your own being all along. So far, we've focused on the personal shadow, the hidden parts of yourself that shape your relationships, your work, your emotions. But Jung went further. He believed the shadow is not just personal, it's collective. The patterns we repress as individuals also show up in families, communities, cultures, even entire nations. And when they're ignored, the collective shadow can be even more destructive than the personal one. Think of history as a mirror of humanity's unconscious. Wars, oppression, prejudice, violence, these aren't accidents. They're eruptions of the collective shadow. What individuals hide on a small scale, societies hide on a massive one. When an entire culture rejects vulnerability, it glorifies domination. When a society denies its own greed, it projects corruption onto its enemies. When groups refuse to face their pain, they scapegoat others to carry it. Jung warned that the most dangerous thing isn't the personal shadow, but when the collective shadow takes control without awareness. And you can see it today. In workplaces that worship productivity but leave people burned out. In social media feeds full of perfect lives that quietly mask loneliness. In cultural stereotypes that shame sensitivity, creativity, or emotion. All of these are reflections of a collective shadow whole societies rejecting qualities they desperately need to heal. Now, why does this matter to you? Because you are shaped by it every single day. If you grew up in a culture that said, "Don't cry, emotions are weakness," your shadow likely buried tenderness. If society told you beauty only looks a certain way, you may have exiled your natural radiance. If you were raised in a world obsessed with hustle, you may carry the shadow of never enough, even after achieving more than you imagined. That's why Jung emphasized not just personal work, but awareness of the larger system. What you reject might not only come from your family or your own choices, it might come from generations of collective rejection. But here's the empowering part. When you do your own shadow work, you're not just healing yourself, you're also contributing to healing the collective. Every time you reclaim your rejected beauty, you push back against a culture that told you to hide. Every time you allow abundance to flow, you defy the systems that taught you scarcity. Every act of integration ripples outward. That's why personal shadow work is never selfish. It's an act of service. A society full of people integrating their shadows is a society with less fear, less projection, less division. Jung called the path of wholeness individuation the process of becoming whole by integrating all parts of yourself. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real. Real means light and dark, strength and weakness, the polished and the raw. Individuation is saying yes to the whole. And when individuals do this, the collective begins to change. Imagine a world where more people face their shadows. There would be less projection, less hate, less fear. Abundance wouldn't be hoarded or hidden, it would be shared. Think about today's obsession with hustle. Work harder, faster, longer. Success is glorified, rest is shamed. That's the collective shadow in action, a society rejecting softness, balance, and rest. But picture someone who chooses differently. They do their shadow work. They recognize they've rejected their own need for rest, and they reclaim it. They start modeling balance at work, honoring boundaries, encouraging others to do the same. Suddenly, one person's integration begins to shift the culture around them. That's the power of personal work in the face of the collective shadow. So ask yourself, which cultural messages shaped your shadow? What did society tell you was too much or not enough? Where have you carried cultural rejection into your own life? When you reflect on this, you begin to see that your personal wounds are part of a much bigger story, and your healing becomes part of something larger than yourself. No one can change the world overnight, but you can change the way you live within it. And each time one of us reclaims a rejected part, we weaken the collective shadow. We bring more light, more abundance, not just for ourselves, but for the whole. We've walked a long road together. We began with Jung's paradox that the very beauty and abundance you long for often live in the shadow, rejected but never gone. We traced the signs: envy, self-criticism, perfectionism, comparison, control, sabotage, numbness. We explored how the shadow shows up in love, in work, in spirituality, even in society itself. And along the way, we practiced how to lift the stones from the fountain through journaling, vulnerability, and small daily acts of courage. Now we stand at the threshold of integration. The shadow is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It carries your wounds, yes, but it also carries your gifts. Every trigger, every pang of envy, every fear, all of them are doors. And behind those doors are the parts of yourself you've been searching for. The beauty you rejected is still yours. The abundance is still flowing. All that's required is the courage to turn toward the dark instead of away from it. So imagine this. Imagine walking into a room and no longer shrinking when someone else shines, because you recognize that same radiance in yourself. Imagine pursuing your work not from fear of inadequacy, but from the joy of expressing your gifts. Imagine relationships where conflict isn't a sign of failure, but an invitation to deeper intimacy. That's what happens when you integrate your shadow. Life doesn't become perfect, it becomes whole. And wholeness is where true abundance lives. Remember too, this isn't only about you. Each time you welcome back a rejected part, you ripple change into the world around you. When you reclaim your voice, you inspire others to speak. When you honor your rest, you challenge a culture of burnout. When you own your beauty, you give others permission to shine. Shadow work is personal transformation that echoes outward. And right now, the world needs that more than ever. So let this be more than another idea you listen to. Let it be a turning point. Tonight, take one small step. Write in your journal. Speak one vulnerable truth. Notice one shadow sign, and meet it with curiosity instead of judgment. Each act of awareness is another stone lifted from your fountain. Each act of courage lets the water of abundance flow more freely. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is your path now, not escaping into light, but integrating the dark, not rejecting the shadow, but reclaiming the beauty it has been holding for you. So breathe deep. Feel the truth of this. You are not broken. You are whole. And the abundance you've been chasing has always been inside you, waiting for this very moment. Stay with this work. Keep walking this path. And if this journey spoke to you, share it. Reflect on it. Join others who are daring to face their shadows. Because together, As each of us reclaims our rejected beauty, we create a world where abundance is not hidden, it's lived, shared, and celebrated.